friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can DIY a D-shaped moss pole for some climbing plants. So D-shaped moss poles, I got into them in I think early 2022, and honestly they have been the only way I've been able to keep my plants on moss poles looking nice. I've tried the round moss poles, I've tried self-watering moss poles, but the D-shaped moss poles really make a huge difference in my collection. And I think a lot of it is because of the plastic back, which doesn't allow water or moisture to escape, and it keeps the sphagnum moss more moist for longer, allowing the roots to grow in there better and your plant to just overall become a bit more mature. You can buy D-shaped moss poles. I have previously. I love my Grow Vertical moss poles, but they are Australia based, so it's not the most local of sources, and I've seen ones you can get in Europe as well, but I have found nothing in the UK, so I thought I would show you how you can make one for yourself using things that you can find in B&Q and on Amazon. If you are new here and you don't know me already, hi, my name is Emma and I make houseplanty content all over the internet, so if you want to follow along with my houseplanty journey and maybe learn something along the way, stick around, watch some more of my videos, and subscribe to my channel. If you're not new here, thank you so much for coming back. I really hope you enjoy this tutorial as well. So let's get into how to make yourself a moss pole like this. First things first, you're gonna need some supplies. Everything here I'll make sure to link down in the description, so head down there if you want to buy any of these supplies for yourself. Plastic coated wire mesh, preferably with a small hole size. This stuff has a 13mm hole, which I'd certainly prefer over a 25mm hole as it holds the moss in better. You can also get uncoated mesh, but I find the plastic stuff lasts longer and looks a little bit better on the poles. Plastic sheets for the backing. Ideally get something A3 size or bigger so you can just cut it down to the size you want. This stuff is 240 microns, which is probably the lowest thickness I'd go for anything above a small pole. If you want to make very small poles, you can get PVC report covers in A4 size. Scissors to cut the plastic. Wire cutters to cut the wire mesh. You could maybe use scissors, but it would probably be a lot more difficult and potentially ruin the scissors. A measuring tape or ruler, a pen to mark the plastic, a hole punch strong enough to cut through the plastic for the back, zip ties, and of course sphagnum moss. This is fresh moss from Soil Ninja and I find it works really well with my poles. I have a link to it down in the description if you want to try it for yourself and you're in the UK or the EU now. Exciting. So the first thing I did was measure out the size of the wire mesh so that the pole would fit into the pot. It was about 6 squares, so that's where I cut, and I cut 25 squares high. But honestly, you can cut these poles to nearly any size you want. I have some that are over 1 meter tall and twice as wide, but you might need to get some thicker plastic so the pole stays sturdy if you're going into larger sizes. At this size, I'm not worried about stability because the wire mesh is pretty rigid, so it'll stand up on its own, no problem. Be careful when cutting though, because the cut ends of the wire mesh are very sharp. I've had many a scratch from wire mesh, whether it's plastic coated or not. Then you should take a couple quick measurements to find the size of the plastic you need for the pole. In this case, my wire mesh was 8 centimeters wide, so I cut the plastic at 12 centimeters. A good rule of thumb is making the plastic about 1.5 times wider than the mesh to get a nice rounded back. I also cut some off the height to make it the right size. I keep the plastic a little bit longer than the mesh as it makes potting up a little bit easier. You can eyeball all of this, but I much prefer to do it precisely as it keeps the poles looking slick and cleaner in our homes. To figure out where to punch the holes, I lay the wire mesh on top of the plastic, aligning a side and the top. I count out every 4 holes or so and mark with a marker so I have a guide on where to punch, and repeat on the other side. Unfortunately, my hole punch is a little bit too small for this, but if I punch 2 holes right next to each other, that seems to work well enough. I was punching about ½ centimeter in from the edge. You don't want it too far in as that'll make the pole look weird, but if it's too close to the edge, you risk the plastic breaking, but I've had no problem with it being about ½ centimeter in. The easiest way to construct the pole, in my opinion, is to attach one side fully so you can kind of taco it around the moss later. I like to use nail clippers to cut off the tails of the zip ties as it creates a more rounded edge, which is nicer and less harsh on your hands and your plants. Sharp edges can cut leaves and that is not ideal. Once you've done this, it's time for the moss. I lay the moss in over the plastic backing, testing the fullness out as I go. I like to make sure I'm tucking the moss into that deep corner to make sure it's nice and tightly packed. The tighter the moss is packed, the more moisture it'll retain, but don't go overboard at the same time. You don't want it to be too dense. Also notice that I left a bit of a gap at the top and the bottom. This will make it easier to pot up and water later. Then you kind of roll the mesh over so it meets the plastic on the other side and put your zip tie in. I like to attach the middle first and then alternate back and forth on the sides as I find it makes everything a bit more even. I'm also making sure to keep the zip ties in the same rows as the ones we did earlier so it's straight. Once you've attached them all, cut off the tails and we've got a pole. From here you can just pot your plant straight onto the pole, but I like to do a few more steps to make sure that everything is a bit more secure. You'll need some extra supplies for this as well, but like I said, they're optional. Soldering iron to punch holes in the pot, and some garden or computer velcro to attach the plant to the pole. Because my plant isn't that big, I'm going to be keeping it in the same pot as before, so I take the plant out and clean the rim of the pot from soil. I really like to attach the pole to the pot so it makes it easier to move about and water. To do this, you need to make holes in the pot, so I'm just marking out where the pole sits so I can go in with my new toy, the soldering iron, and poke some holes. Just be careful with this method as soldering irons are very hot and probably not safe, but they're safer than how I used to do it, so I'll take the risk in this case. Then you can put the pole back into the pot and connect them with more zip ties. Don't tighten them too tight as this can warp the pot a bit. Just try to make it even and keep it together enough so that the pole isn't wiggling around if you pick it up. Something I find super important when you're potting with moss poles like this is that your soil needs to be super well draining. I like to add a lot of extra bark to do this. I try to get it behind the wire mesh at the bottom underneath the sphagnum, and then I'll go ahead and put some soil in the bottom as well before putting my plants in. Y'all probably know how to pot up a plant at this point, so I'll just let the music play for a little bit. You can leave your plant just like this and pray to the plant gods that it attaches itself to the pole, but I like to make sure it does, so I use something like garden velcro or computer velcro to help strap them on there. This helps the nodes come in contact with the moss and hopefully encourages them to root into the pole and grow bigger and more mature leaves. You can use string or pole staples, but I like this as it's easy to move around once the plant grows and it's reusable. So that is it. That is how you make your D-shaped moss pole. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope that you are able to make some for your plants as well, because honestly, they are my favorite moss poles. So show me your creations, tag me in them. I would absolutely love to see them. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up down below and leave a comment on other houseplanty things that you'd like me to talk about in the future, and subscribe for more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!